Good day, everybody. This is Dan over at SimpliPhi Power. We are a battery storage manufacturer out of the United States. We've been doing business in Australia for the past 5 years now and have been around since 2010. So I really appreciate you all attending. It's been a couple of years now since I've actually been in Australia. However, we have some great regional partners throughout the area. And today I really just want to take some time, educate on the perspective from our company, certain trends, emerging technologies, best practices, and some business opportunities that we can hopefully take advantage of going into the new year and the years to follow. So I really appreciate you attending. Any and all questions, I'll be leaving my email address, contact information at the end of the presentation, and we're always happy, regardless of time zones, to help answer questions as they come up. And so with that, today we'll be discussing LFP batteries, that's lithium iron phosphate batteries for residential, commercial projects specifically. So looking forward to discussing, looking forward to your questions, and let's get started. So the topics that will be discussed more thoroughly are going to be, let's start general. Why lithium iron phosphate? What's the differences there? Capitalizing on a smarter battery to really add value to the projects, whether we're talking residential or commercial. And then finally, let's get into some of the best practices and those considerations when discussing safety, reliability, and always cost with our customers. So why LFP? Again, lithium iron phosphate. With considerations on lithium batteries, we have a handful always available to us. And so the main considerations, the topics that are most common to really come up for you and your customers during your pitches or just day to day are going to revolve around a few key things. And that you'll see on the left-hand side, the far left-hand side. And first, of course, is safety, danger of thermal runaway, essentially fire, right? Followed by toxic elements. Is it safe for the landfill, end of life, recyclability, something that people are always considering. One of those hidden practices is, does it involve any abusive mining practices? Around the world, we source so many things through our supply chain. Where do they come from? How do they evolve into the final product? And who's digging those up? Again, we'll look at ventilation required, other ancillary type equipment to ensure the safety of the batteries. And of course, cooling equipment, which is common for a variety of batteries. And are there any additional monitoring or equipment required, typically related to the warranties? And then what are those temperatures that they can really withstand? So as you'll see here, LFP comes out as a clear winner for stationary storage. Let's be clear, it may not be the best bet, obviously, for a more mobile type application, but within a stationary situation, an LFP battery is more often than not going to be the absolute top best solution for most customers. So in the category of thermal runaway and fire, is there a risk? No, of course it can. Anything can catch on fire that's made of a material, but in its ability to propagate fire, that is to spread fire outside of its individual cell, LFP is by far the safest and will not propagate that fire externally. Whereas as we see with other chemistries in the lithium family, most commonly NMC, LMO, NCA, LCO, they all inherently have cobalt in them. That's the property or the material that is going to propagate that fire externally and more or less run rampant in a situation of fire, whether it's internal to that battery specifically, or perhaps an external fire from the home or the garage where it's located. So in terms of safety, LFP, again, second to none there. As far as toxic elements, again, cobalt isn't within LFP chemistry, so there aren't any toxic elements there. It is landfill safe for those that are concerned with what happens at the end of life of that battery. LFP is going to be safe to recycle. and it does not involve any abusive practices. We all know a majority of cobalt comes from the Democratic Republic of Congo in the African continent. And there's oftentimes some pretty unfortunate practices in how that is mined, oftentimes involving children. So it's just something as a supply chain to certainly consider what's going into that battery and how that impacts everyone just from a human perspective. So philosophically, LFP is something we at SimpliPhi, of course, chose over 10 years ago. Ventilation and cooling, let's put those two together, because those are some ancillary equipment that are typically required, as you can see, for other chemistries that are lithium, but not required for LFP for most warranties, including our own as well. And then safety and monitoring equipment, not required either for an LFP chemistry such as SimpliPhi's. And then something really important for the variety of temperatures, environments that batteries can go in, so you can reach a wider audience, is its ability to withstand high temperature environments and even cold environments. And so with LFP, SimpliPhi specifically, we can reach up to 140 degrees Fahrenheit, that is 200 C. So with that in mind, keep those chemistry comparisons forefront and understand that the big takeaway is from safety, supply chain, and extra costs that may not be reflected in that upfront price tag when discussing with customers. So to reiterate here, let's focus on an example. Here at SimpliPhi, we have what we see is our number one product. It's a building block of sorts. It's a 3.8 kilowatt hour battery in either 24 or 48 volts. And as you'll see on the left-hand side, chemistry, lithium iron phosphate. Form factor, what we'll see is that we have a few options in the industry. First being cylindrical, the second pouch, and the third prismatic. Now prismatic, it's a safe approach. It's just very bulky and large, so it adds to the footprint. The pouch, certainly the cheapest option, which is why we see those in a lot of consumer electronics. But as that pouch heats up, it expands, contracts, expands, contracts, and that heat radiates outwards, of course, and is cause for concern. So it's a less safe option. It's just more cost effective. However, the Goldilocks situation is that cylindrical cell, something similar to like a AA battery. And that in and of itself improves both in terms of its footprint, but also its safety and power output when strung together. So within a SimpliPhi battery, for example, you'll receive the best of both worlds. That's an LFP chemistry and a cylindrical cell within each unit. Now, just to touch one last time on thermal runaway, here's some specifics for those that want to get more in depth on it. It's really comes down to when the battery, or more specifically the cell, actually becomes hot enough that the chemical reaction begins to generate more heat, and that just accelerates the action, which is, you know, the propagation of that fire, and can cause off-gassing, which leads to the fire or the explosion that we've seen in the news more recently with a few companies and their recalls. Now, what causes it? It's really typically down to the cell failure. And at the end of the day, it can be caused by external heat sources, of course, like an unrelated fire, as I mentioned before, and anything that really increases the temperature enough to be, you know, self-sustaining. So that is thermal runaway in a nutshell, and something that as time moves on and as policies and regulations catch up with the different lithium technologies, we're already seeing it in the States, we're seeing it in Australia, and even in Europe as well, with their concerns around thermal runaway, chemistry choice, and the safety for homeowners and businesses. Now, again, one last slide here, just detailing the thermal runaway in a more, you know, detailed approach. But the big takeaway here is LFP being able to reach a higher temperature than a traditional, say, NMC, nickel, manganese, cobalt, and other cobalt-based chemistries before thermal runaway begins. And so as you can see, LFP, right around 200 C, it can reach before it even begins, whereas NMC is at a much lower temperature and can cause thermal runaway far sooner. So you have a much better margin of error should a worst case scenario happen when choosing LFP. So again, things to be considered. Now, let's stay on the topic of safety here, because maintaining a safe operating temperature for the cobalt-based system or cobalt battery, there's added cost, and that's something that inevitably will come up with your customers. We'll touch on a little bit more later in the presentation. And so two things here, actually three, is going to be it adds cost, an additional point of failure, and of course, that additional equipment, it takes power to run it. So there's a parasitic drain on the battery capacity over the lifetime, which it really does add up. Now, as an example, again, SimpliPhi batteries have a wider operating temperature than a cobalt-based battery, but also the batteries require no ventilation, cooling, or any thermal monitoring, all things that are, again, additional cost, additional point of failures, and a drain on the overall battery performance. So I'd like to just share with you all just a brief overview of some of the products that we do offer through our distribution throughout the country. And it starts out on a nice little mobile scale, expeditionary series, great for disaster response and just on the go, keep it in your truck or your car. Those smaller units are great, including a fold out solar panel kit, but the battery modules, that's the bread and butter with SimpliPhi batteries, and they're scalable, up into the, hundreds of kilowatt hours range, down to 3.8 kilowatt hours at its most simple level. And then of course there's integrated systems and high voltage, but what they all have in common is that they're safe, they're proven, and they're simple in terms of installation, essentially zero maintenance, and long lasting. So in terms of the safety, we've already gone over that. Proven 10 years of deployments, longer than our warranty. And in Australia alone, over the past 5 years, we've had 0 batteries come back from the field with any issues, which is something we really do enjoy hanging our hat on and proud of, something that will continue. So let's talk about adding some value for your customers, because as we grow in the industry across all the options that you have from a variety of battery manufacturers, the batteries themselves are becoming smarter in addition to the power electronics, the inverters that we're choosing. So I'd like to discuss and share with you a few key details here. So let's identify the problem that we're trying to help solve first and foremost. And for the majority of folks, it's limited access to a safe, reliable, and affordable, sustainable power. So on one side, we have escalating energy costs. We're seeing it not only in the US, but throughout Australia, throughout Europe. Energy costs are on the rise. It's an annual trend. And so residential electricity prices have consistently increased year over year. Utilities are using various ways to engage customers to make smarter decisions, whether it's time of use rates or surge pricing. But at the end of the day, we're still expecting an increase of about 30% of electricity prices just in the next 5 years alone. So beyond that, we still have a great deal of diesel generation for remote and island communities, just throughout the world, but certainly here in Australia. And that can really range from 50 cents to over $1 per kilowatt hour in some of the applications I've been a part of just in the past 12 months. And that's where we can really make a huge improvement with our customers, is helping solve those problems for energy cost. Additionally, there's failing infrastructure for larger projects. So just alone, because of weather-related power outages, they're becoming significantly more common. And we all remember earlier this year the tragedies that occurred with the rampant wildfires. And I myself was even caught in a wildfire about 1.5 years ago, something that you just never forget. It's something out of Hollywood movies. And the folks that are impacted after that, they either lose their livelihoods, their homes, all these areas where simple microgrids or remote power storage can alleviate a lot of the aging infrastructure that utilities have neglected. And so we're starting to see more and more communities take these projects on. And with that, energy storage is a fantastic fit that can scale to the needs of those communities. Now, decarbonization, those are more governmental type initiatives. And of course, we're going back and forth between a variety of administrations in our government. But the common trend continues that most administrations are still on the side of decreasing carbonization and supplementing that with renewable energy sources, of which energy storage fits perfectly in that puzzle piece to help. Now, a few of these opportunities, just to reiterate, are going to be heavy duty charging for vehicles, creating that network of charging available throughout the country, the highways, the thoroughfares, all of that. We'll also have great opportunities in cities and workplaces, so commercial installations and multi-unit dwellings, apartments, compounds, and everything in between. So with that, we'll be able to afford more people access to safe, reliable, and affordable sustainable power, both on grid, as well as those that choose to be off the grid. So as an example, SimpliPhi Power has recently this year come out with the AmpliFi Battery. This is a battery that has integrated communications ports in it, and it comes in a really small footprint, which is excellent for a variety of reasons. So as you'll see on the right-hand side, there's some specs. You'll find it on the website as well. I won't spend too much time on it, but they're easily mobile. They're great logistically, getting them to remote locations or in urban dense populations as well. And they can be oriented any which way, which provides a lot of flexibility to installers for unique areas where space is confined or you can't hang it traditionally on a wall. So specifically related to the communications aspects, it's a closed loop communication with the inverter. There's no external cards required for the inverter integration. And currently right now, Solarc is one of our leading inverters that we've integrated with, but Selectronic, Victron, all the majors are still in the final testing phases for integrating correctly with the AmpliFi Battery, and that will be starting going into the new year. So we're really excited about that, because what that's going to bring is a battery that provides a high level of accurate readings for the state of charge, the voltage, charge and discharge, really flexible when it comes to sizing the variety of applications you can do. And furthermore, I always say it's a future proof when I'm discussing it with customers, because when you can do remote upgrades to the firmware, it really is a game changer for a lot of folks to future proof that system for the next 10 years and beyond, the warranty period. And then finally, speaking of warranties, SimpliPhi again carries a 10-year unlimited cycle warranty at 100% depth of discharge. When speaking with customers, of course, I do tend to recommend an 80% depth of discharge, just because it's going to maximize that life of that battery well beyond 10 years. Traditionally, in the years past, we've had a 10,000 cycle warranty, but we wanted to simplify it, pun intended, but we wanted to simplify it and just do a straight 10-year warranty. But since we've been around for darn near over 10 years now, we're very confident in the ability of the battery to provide energy storage well beyond 10 years. And just because it comes to that 10-year warranty, something I always remind people of is that at the end of life, that 10-year warranty, you're still going to have 80% of capacity remaining. So that battery is still alive and kicking well beyond that 10 years, assuming at 80% depth of discharge. And then just quickly, the SimpliPhi power energy storage systems. We're leveraging renewables by decoupling the supply and the demand on the grid and off grid, reducing CO2 and greenhouse gas emissions. That's something you hear all the time. But it really provides a lot of creativity in how we can reimagine the power grid and poles and wires and remote communities. And at the end of the day, we have to, every single one of us, we all have to deliver economic value. And by eliminating the economic losses due to power outages and reducing the daily energy costs through demand charge management or peak shaving or time of use, whichever utility is using those, we can really make a huge beneficial impact, economically speaking, for both the end user as well as the community at large. So I wanted to share a few deployments. Now, not all of these will be in Australia, of course, but they're highly relatable and they're within the region, and they're my most recent projects. And the first one is here over in New Zealand, where we worked with PowerCo. And the challenge there, similar to situations throughout Australia that I've worked on over the years, has been upgrading the network and improvement of the lines. Were just not cost effective. It would have been an incredible amount of money to build out the lines to that site. And what we came up with in working with PowerCo is to create containerized solutions. And while I mentioned before the footprint of our standard 3.8 kilowatt hour battery, the little black box in the bottom left-hand corner, those were able to be airlifted through helicopter to locations difficult to gain access, and have been ideal for remote and emergency situations, and have been providing supplemental and alternative electricity to the utility grid in certain situations. But at the end of the day, it really came down to the dairy and egg farmers being able to access just uninterruptible power. And of course, on the economic side, reducing the significant operation management costs through the elimination of the transmission lines. So it's a huge win-win, something we'll see more common as time moves forward and the lines need to be reassessed and reevaluated in building them out as communities spread out further from city centers. These are all considerations to make and can make a huge impact on your project penciling out economically. So it's something that you can always talk with our team on, draw from past experiences, past success stories, and replicate it for your customers as well. Another one was actually done over in Hawaii, but the reason I love it is we are in certain few discussions with other school districts, not only around the world, but specifically in Australia as well, where the off-grid solar and energy storage to power school districts, especially in hot areas where air conditioning can be a huge draw to make it comfortable for students to learn. The Department of Education over in Hawaii needed to upgrade 256 of those schools throughout the island and provide adequate, cooling, all AC, of course. And the estimated cost, it still blows me away today, with new AC was $1.7 billion. And that was mainly due to the upgrading of electrical infrastructure, old buildings, and just the utility grid in general. But at the end, what we were able to accomplish is with solar and the Phi storage, SimpliPhi storage systems, made it financially feasible to run the AC units while lowering the energy costs by 6%. Huge savings for over 1,300 classrooms in the 88 of those schools so far just to date. And this is something for those that are focusing on either public properties or large installations in especially warm climates where AC is, absolutely necessary to work and function. This is a great example to draw on a big success story and something, again, we can replicate throughout regions. And then finally, another one here. This one was actually just off the coast. And what we really wanted to accomplish here was an off-grid power situation, right? So creating a single system to the power multiple dwellings. And we partnered with using Victron. So we created that system with a complement of different equipment to generate, store, and provide just 100% resilience on a remote off-grid island without compromising the lifestyle. So this is another prime example of logistics meeting functionality, meaning we can get into remote locations or densely populated urban centers with a small footprint and provide a large amount of power. So that the end result there was the customer expected to save roughly 1.6 million or 14,000 US just in the first year alone. So it's a significant savings. Again, another big bonus for them that's going to last well over a decade and bring power to their remote location. And then another containerized situation here for water filtering. It's a big topic that's been coming up more and more throughout a few of the provinces that I've been working in over the past few years. And that's been providing local communities with a reliable source of clean drinking water. A lot of times we're able to fully provide transportable treatment system that uses a reverse osmosis, but pairing that obviously with solar. Of course, we need batteries to really make the system full. So in this situation, we were able to produce portable water based on Australian drinking water guidelines, and it was capable of operating completely off grid and also simultaneously with the grid connection. And this solution happened to be, again, very scalable and modular in design, but it was standard unit produces up to about 28 kiloliters a day. So low maintenance, and all consumers are easily replaced in the field. And it was factory tested before delivery. So these are pop-up situations that can really make a dramatic difference and improvement to communities. And drinking water, as we all know, is incredibly important. So there's a wide variety after looking at a few of these case studies and deployments for commercial uses, remote locations, and urbanly dense situations as well, using small yet powerful batteries with a safe, reliable, and cost-effective chemistry. So let's relate this all to the customers, right? Safety, reliability, cost. Topics that always come up every single time, right? So for safety, we're looking again, thermal runaway, they're non-toxic, we can recycle them, and there's no maintenance. Really straightforward. Those four things will get you through a conversation really simply and straight to the point, so the customer feels good about their decision at the end of the day, whether at their home or at their business. The reliability, let's talk about the easiness to install, because that's first and foremost. You guys are boots on the ground, your trucks and ladders are out. It's not going to turn into a science project when you're on site. And that's one of the best feedbacks we get, is how simple it is to install. And beyond that, when we're looking at warranties and evaluating those warranties based on all the options and varieties of batteries that you have these days, always compare what the spec sheet says to what actually that warranty supports. It's a big difference on the power, big difference in how you're able to install it, potentially what other requirements you need to purchase and install, obviously ventilation, cooling, things of that nature. Because anyone at the end of the day can put what they want on a spec sheet, but what it comes down to, and the peace of mind for your customers, is what's in that warranty, right? And what it's going to provide them safely and reliably. And then something else that's worth mentioning is the efficient use of that available capacity. For example, a SimpliPhi battery is 98% efficient. Other batteries out there may be 90 or 85% efficient or less. And so while you might have a larger battery with a lot of kilowatt hours, if you can't use that power efficiently, then you're really not having the same value that's seen on that price sticker, even if it's a little bit less up front. But if it's not going to give you the amount of cycles and cost per kilowatt hour over the lifetime of that battery. And then finally, just because it's the end of the warranty doesn't mean that battery is done. So the end of life battery capacity remaining. Reliability is important with that because a lot of times we'll factor the cost, and rightfully so, on what we're called the worst case scenario, the warranty ending and the battery being dead. But at the end of those 10 years, for example, with a SimpliPhi battery, we're still going to have 80% of that battery life remaining. So that battery is still good to go. And a consideration worth sharing with your customers is understanding what happens at the end of that warranty. Can we still use the battery, or do we have to replace the system? And something I'm just really proud of. We've had some great installers we've got to work with throughout Australia, some great distributors, and we've had 0 failures of deployed batteries in Australia since we began back in early 2016. And it's something that we plan to continue that trend of quality manufacturing and reliable products for your customers, because we know you've built your reputations on good quality work, and we're here to offer you a good quality battery that you can stand behind. So let's talk about cost. It's a topic at the forefront of everybody's mind. And so we take the approach here of what's the true cost of a kilowatt hour? And it boils down to a levelized cost of that energy. And this gives you a more specific way, an effective way to evaluate and compare batteries apples to apples. And so with the LCOE, or levelized cost of energy, works across generating assets and systems in the sense that we're looking at PV systems, batteries, solar and storage system, fossil fuel power plants. You can apply this LCOE formula to any of those situations. And so specifically for the battery, what's the cost of every kilowatt hour I can get out of this system? Now, it looks a little funky at the top with the equation, but it's really simple. It's the cost of that battery divided by the capacity of the cycles and the depth of discharge. And what those ancillary costs are that I mentioned before, right? Because those are those hidden costs not reflected in the price tag typically. So, how much square footage are you taking up? Weight, which obviously equates to shipping, since most batteries nowadays are being imported to Australia anyhow. So that, along with what's required to get the equipment to the site or just to install it. I mean, there's some pretty heavy batteries out there. I'm personally not lifting with my back, that's for sure. So are there forklifts required or other, equipment that's going to cost money and time? And then maintenance. I mean, that's the big one, right? Can you rely on that battery? You're going to have your guys out there, your trucks and ladders coming to service that battery 6 months, 2 years, 5 years down the road. It's something, thankfully, we haven't seen with the SimpliPhi batteries, but it's certainly a point of consideration for a variety of other batteries out there that inevitably are going to come back to potentially haunt you. And then one of the more popular things that adds cost is cooling or ventilation, or even the setbacks required depending on where you're installing them. And replacement costs. Obviously, if the performance is not there, they're going to have to replace those batteries sooner than necessary. And when you replace a battery system every 3 years, as opposed to buying the longer lasting system that's going to last 3 times as long, then it's something to factor into that calculator, of course. So one thing I'd like to share with you is anytime you hop on our website, we have a variety of calculators that are going to help you from lead acid bank replacement to a simple system size calculator, all the way to what we just talked about here in an LCOE calculator. And those are all under our support tab in our webpage. So please visit simplifypower.com and you'll be able to have free access to those calculators, which will help bring a great apples to apples comparison, whether we're the right solution or not. based on cost alone. So use those as you see fit. And if you have questions, again, I'll be sharing my contact information. I'd be happy to give any demonstrations as you play with those calculators, those tools in our support system. And this is just a reiteration of that. The tool, again, shows how to look beyond just the upfront costs and really understand how to determine the ROI of those batteries and what that cost of the lifetime of the battery looks like. And again, this is all found on our website. Happy to walk you through it. You can also find it on YouTube as well with some real world live examples. So with that, I really do appreciate your time, you attending, taking interest in this great topic, because we're all here to bring more security, reliability, and safety to our customers, but also grow our own companies and really make 2021 a fantastic year. We'd love to hear from you as installers, contractors, what's working, what's not working, most importantly, and how we can step in to either educate, improve, or bring a better product to market based on your needs as well. So really appreciate any feedback. My email address is right at the bottom. And I really look forward to working with you all, and happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you again.